etc., and all the other stakeholders who are helping us commemorate or to launch this week-long celebration that is indeed expected to take place from the 24th to the 31st, if I'm correct. It's my pleasure to have the opportunity to be with you this morning, and I want to thank UNESCO and its partners for inviting me to address you. I'm happy that UNESCO and its partners have instituted the Global MIL Week as a major occasion for stakeholders to review and celebrate the progress achieved towards media and information literacy for all, and at the same time to introspect on what needs to be done moving forward. Media and information literacy encompass the knowledge, the attitude, and the sum of the skills that are needed to know when and what information is needed, where and how to obtain that information, how to evaluate it critically, and organize it once it's found, and how to use it in an ethical way. The concept of MIL extends beyond communication and information technologies to include learning, critical thinking, and interpretative skills across and beyond professional and educational boundaries. MIL consists of all types of information resources, oral, print, and digital. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the things that makes a difference between the human society and other societies is language, communication, and the dissemination of information. You can find a shoal of fish, you can find a group of other living beings, but the reason for which they don't have the ability to organize as well as we do, to build as well as we do, to pass on knowledge as well as we do, to build a society like ours, can be attributed to factors including language, communication, and information dissemination. And so this gift that we have of language, communication, and information dissemination is one that we ought not to take for granted. And within the human society itself, one of the things that separates the enlightened, progressive societies and those that are not necessarily enlightened and progressive is knowledge. The story is told, particularly for the Christians, of how when the good Lord wanted to discipline some people from Babel, the instrument that he used was to mix up their language so that they no longer had the ability to coordinate, to communicate, to understand, to build, and to keep on the path on which they were going. Knowledge, information management, communication starts with information itself. And one of the things that that information must possess is the fact that it must be true. It's basic. The reason for which we are talking about misinformation today is because we are observing that there could actually be information that is not true. And that information then takes the entire society on a different path. That information must not only be true, but it must be relevant. Of course, there's a lot of information that could be true, but may not even be relevant for the purposes of the society's advancement. Even if it is true and relevant, it must be within context. The communication studies professionals will explain to you that the same piece of information, true and relevant, if taken out of context, can mean something else altogether. And most importantly, it must be unadulterated. Democracies, governance systems, and societies that are able to build and move forward are societies that have this type of information as a dominant feature. Information that is true, that is relevant, that is in context, that is unadulterated. Why are we talking so much about misinformation during the COVID era? I humbly submit to you that it is because we have observed that when the world was at the brink, information that was not true, that was not relevant, that was not within context, that was adulterated, had the ability to kill more people, even than other elements or diseases or weapons. But the need to have information literacy permeates across the society. The need to encourage the society to pay attention to information that is true, that is relevant, that is in context, that is unadulterated, ought not to be limited to fighting pandemics only. Indeed, it must cut across our everyday life. If our democracy, if the governance system that we seek for ourselves, if the exercise of trying to build a good society that we've been embarking upon since 1957 is to succeed, then we must recognize that the need to deal with misinformation should not end with COVID. It should actually cut across our everyday lives. When consuming or putting out information, one of the things we must realize is that, like Chief Moment and his team presented, and I'll borrow their expression, information goes a long way to frame narratives and cultivate attitudes in our society. So we cannot take for granted the kind of information we are sharing on WhatsApp, putting out in our newspapers, putting out on our websites, on our social media platforms, writing on our Facebook page, thinking that it is just for fun, we're just enjoying ourselves, we're just doing somebody some harm or having a joke at someone's expense. Because it goes a long way to frame the narrative of society and to cultivate the attitudes in society. For the week ahead of the 24th to the 31st of October, this information literacy exercise, in my view, calls us to introspect, to think critically about how we are handling information within this jurisdiction, and whether it is contributing to the advancement of our democracy, contributing to the development of the country that we are seeking to build, or whether it is helping us retrogress. Our view from the Information Ministry is that this week is a week of introspection. For those who put out public information, for those who shape public information, for those who consume public information, it is a week that we have an opportunity to introspect and ask ourselves how we are playing our role, handling the kind of information we are handling, the way we are handling it, and whether it is contributing to the advancement of our society or contributing to the retrogression. We believe that in doing this, a few things must be considered. One, what is the capacity of the persons who are putting out information and shaping the public narrative? And can we do something to help that capacity so that the information that is put out and the narratives that are shaped are in the public interest, are for the public good? As we go through this week of introspection, we believe that that is one of the questions that we must answer. Very often you find the society complaining and arguing and pointing fingers at my media colleagues, that they are the problem. But I think we should flip the coin and ask ourselves, what is the capacity? And what can we do to help improve that capacity so that the information that they put out, and more importantly, the narrative that they shape, whether they will tell you the glass is half full or half empty, that's the narrative. Whether or not that is something that we can support in helping to build capacity for them. For us at the Ministry of Information, we've rolled out a media capacity enhancement program which seeks to help a lot of practitioners build their capacity, because not many practitioners have actually had the opportunity to have formal training or some sort of education in this very professional job of journalism. For many of us, myself included, we have been given the microphone simply because we may be articulate in one language or the other. But journalism is a professional exercise. There are ethics associated with it beyond the ratings and the revenues that will come to the organization. And so all of us as a society, as we go through this week of introspection, must, number one, be interested in supporting our media practitioners build capacity. That is the only way we can be sure that the kind of information they will continuously put out will be information that we are all comfortable is in the public interest. The kind of narratives that they will shape will be narratives that we are all sure is in the public interest. Another thing I believe we should spend some time introspecting about doing this week is the skill of the information consumer. Information is an intangible good. And the consumer, all of you who are here, the millions who consume information across the country, must also be supported with some skills with which they can examine the information that they are consuming. The responsibility, I believe, lies on the consumer as well to determine whether or not this information I'm consuming is true, is factual, is relevant, is beneficial, or sounds juiced up or irrelevant. I'm sure you're familiar with the many who say, I heard it on the radio. I read it on the internet. Somebody forwarded it to me. It was in the newspaper. The average assumption is that once I heard it on the radio or saw it on the television, or I read it on the internet or in the newspaper, it is true. But we are beginning to learn on a daily basis, and COVID and the misinformation management around COVID is only a light to draw our attention to the fact that that cannot be true. And so the consumer of information, respectfully, I believe, must also be assisted with some basic skills to examine for himself or for himself. This link that somebody posted on our WhatsApp group, what do I do to determine if it is true or false? If it is information that I should consume and believe, or if it is something I should ignore. This thing that I saw printed in this newspaper, or this thing that I heard on this radio, who is the person who is articulating that position? And has the person interviewing him or her even had the opportunity to subject this information to some analysis or critique? Or are we doing, I have heard, somebody has told me, and sending that across to the entire society? Because in the end, that is what the society will believe, and that is what the society will become. I believe that as we go through this week of introspection, a second matter we should think about is how to assist the public with the skills to examine the basic information that comes through on the multiplicity of channels. I also believe that in this in this week of introspection, we should have some time to examine who we truly are. Because the media only reflects who we truly are. The same tools and instruments of media are available in many other societies. But in other societies, they may not necessarily be using it for rumor mongering, amplifying beefs among celebrities, amplifying stories about suspicions of one another, and just driving ourselves continuously to the brink. The same tools in some other societies are being used to highlight and to amplify what is good about those societies, the opportunities in those societies, the excellent stories in those societies that can now be mainstreamed. So what does this say about us? If we are using the same tools for some other purpose, this week of introspection, in the greatest of respect, I believe, gives us an opportunity also to examine who we really are and what we are truly promoting, even with these tools that we have been given. Because the same tools in the hands of some other persons in other jurisdictions are being used for the public good. And in our jurisdiction, we have cause to complain a lot more. I believe that if we have an opportunity to introspect some more in this regard, we may come up with some reflections on the way forward. Because if we don't, the same information that keeps being churned out will end up framing the narratives about us, cultivating the attitudes that in particular our children and the generations unborn will follow up on. At the Ministry of Information, we are doing a number of things to try to provide a lot more public information. We've introduced the Minister's Press Briefings. We've introduced social media campaigns. We're embarking on research that helps us to understand the needs in particular, for example, of the media ecosystem, and to examine what sort of support we can give them. I've just told you about the Media Capacity Enhancement Program, and I'm very happy about our collaborators. The Communication Educators Association of Ghana, UNESCO, GIJ, and many others, all of who are represented here. And I'd like to take a moment to pay tribute to all of you. It is our hope that the celebration of this week will give us an opportunity to introspect, come up with some reflections that will help us to contribute to curbing some of the excesses in this space. I want to thank you for your time and for paying attention to the few words I've had to share with you. I also want to invite all our partners who are here to join me up on stage as we do a formal declaration of the Global Media and Information Literacy Week 2021 to be duly launched. And so Pen Plus Bytes, DW, GIJ, UNESCO, School of Communication Studies, Ministry of Communications, please, may I ask your reps to join me? We'll do a countdown to 5, and then we will declare the 2021 And so, on behalf of the various partner agencies, as we count down from 5 to 1, we'll declare the week formally open. So if we'll count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much.